He also has briefed the Department of Defense, the United States Congress, and his research on the economic war, particularly with Asia and with a China focus. And so it's an honor for us to have Kevin Freeman with us here at City Elders of Tulsa. Let's put our hands together and welcome him this morning.
Thank you, Jesse. It's great to see so many wonderful friends here, and my dad and his wife, Dad Carey and his wife Donna, and Jim Dow who came, and the Glessners and Pat Calhoun, and so many people that I've known through the years. So it's an honor to be here. What I'm going to talk about is an economic war, and we've had a spiritual awareness. And that is that the kingdom of God is inevitable. The kingdom of God is among you. The kingdom of God is what we're looking for and what we're creating on this earth. And we believe God, and we're going to win. And that's the good news. The bad news isn't really bad news, but it's the challenge that we face. And we face a big challenge. So I'm going to talk about all enemies, foreign and domestic. When Colonel Dow took his oath, when they take the oath anywhere at any level, Senate or whatever, it's to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And the reality is that we have enemies, foreign and domestic, and they want to take down America. But it's a spiritual war more than it is a physical war. But it manifests as an economic war. When I was at the University of Tulsa, the big issue was the Cold War and the Russians, and were they going to drop a nuclear bomb on us? From that point till this point, it's morphed. It's not a military war per se. It's more of an economic war, and you'll see it the impact on your pocketbook. And it manifests as an economic war because the enemy uses greed and lust as primary weapons. Now, I'm going to fire hose you, and I apologize for that. I see the clock here, and Jesse said, tell him this and this and this and this, so I'm going to dump it all, and I'm going to go fast. I'll stick around afterwards for questions. How did we get here? It's about money and power. You know, you've heard the phrase, it's always all about the money. Well, that's true to a certain degree, at least in the natural realm. In the spiritual realm, it's all about whether or not you're going to bow your knee to Jesus or you're going to bow your knee to Satan. But in the natural realm, it usually comes down to the money. It's a long-term struggle. It's a collective versus the individual. And you see that battle. You see that in every newscast. Get along, go along with the society. Society says do this, you need to be this way, versus the individual liberty that made this country great. And that's the battle between communism and freedom. Unfortunately, it used to be that Wall Street and corporate America were on the side of the individual because they were the consumer. That's not true anymore, and I'll tell you about that. So the categories of the enemy are foreign, which would be China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and jihadis, and domestic, which includes, unfortunately, woke corporations. Why, you know, I want to buy a cola. I don't want you to tell me how to live my life, right? It's a top-down, bottom-up, outside-inside, but it's all spiritual. And I don't just say this at City Elders. I say this in every presentation. I said it in the Pentagon. I've said it in every CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, everywhere I've gone. I've said this is a spiritual war because that's the truth. All right, the challenge is that the war has multiple fronts. And the multiple fronts, some of which you're aware of and you're feeling the impact every day, and some of which you're not necessarily aware of, but they're just as real. When I started talking to the Pentagon, for example, in 2008, I told them China was not our friend. And they said, oh, they're our banker. They provide money to us. They're not our friend. No, they're cooperating militarily. They're not our friend. Finally, people are waking up to what I've said for a dozen years. But there's all this on Wall Street and corporate America. I want to tell you, corporate America is not our friend. The Chamber of Commerce is not our friend. They are standing against us with wokeness, pushing an agenda that's contrary to how this nation was founded and what you believe in your hearts. It's coming from the ESG movement. Have you heard of that? We'll talk about it. Environmental, social, governance. That's just an evil plague that's being forced on our country. And it's happening at corporate boards. And they're forcing investment into Chinese companies. You don't know this, but if you own a mutual fund, chances are you've been funding communist China. And I'll tell you about that. Chinese Unrestricted Warfare came out in a book in 1999, published by two senior colonels of the People's Liberation Army. These two senior colonels, PLA colonels, are now gone on. One's a major general and runs their National Defense University. This is their doctrine. This is what they believe. They believe that they could not take America on directly, militarily, so they would undermine America and build themselves up at the same time till they were at least as large, if not larger, economically and militarily. They believe that their rightful place is the Middle Kingdom between heaven and earth, and that they should run absolutely everything. And they've infiltrated Western powers. They've infiltrated our education system, entertainment, boardrooms, political system, and financial system. That's unfortunately a fact. They are not our friends and not our... Now, the Chinese people, they're wonderful. Chinese people are innovative. The gospel is being preached across China despite the repression. The people are good. The system, communism, is bad. And by the way, people told us they're not communists. Not true. Xi Jinping is absolutely communist and has recently made billionaires disappear. Their top Hollywood-type stars disappear. They are taking communism and they want us exported around the world. And that's been their long-term plan. They've had remarkable success. When they published the book Unrestricted Warfare, the Chinese economy was literally 1/10 the size of the American economy, roughly the size of Italy's economy. Less than California, less than Texas. That is how far and how fast they've gone in 20 years. And how have they done it? Well, they've done it by taking control of major global organizations like the United Nations and the World Health Organization. And right now, they believe they're poised for dominance. And if you look in the natural realm, it's probably true. We know better because we know Jesus, right? Okay, so this is all built on communist goals. My dad, I'll give a shout out to him. He introduced me to a man named W. Cleon Skousen, who wrote the book, The Naked Communist. In The Naked Communist, they published the 45 goals of the Communist Party in the United States. These were entered into the congressional record by a Florida congressman in 1963. These were the goals that they had. Promote free trade at all costs. Now, why would communists promote free trade? Because they knew that the Soviet Union economy could not withstand the pressure of a fair competition. So they wanted to have free trade so that we would do trade. And Arm & Hammer and Occidental Petroleum and all that, they pushed for trade with the communists because they wanted to not they, but the communists wanted their nation propped up. Recognize Red China as the true China, promote UN as the hope for mankind, capture one or both of the political parties, get control of the schools, use student riots. Is it sounding familiar? This sounds like the headlines of the past 60 years. Gain control of key media figures, discredit American history and culture, make the founding fathers to be evil, racist, slave owners, degrade art so that art that in the public square is no longer beautiful but unrecognizable, eliminate obscenity laws, promote pornography and homosexuality, infiltrate the churches, eliminate prayer from schools, discredit the family, internationalize the Panama Canal. All 45 of their goals have come true. Come to pass in one form or another. China is now leading this push. The Soviet Union collapsed and then rebranded. All they did was take it and say, oh, you know, we're going to come back in a different form, and that's what they've done. They're still participating in this, but China's now got the lead on all of this. And this unrestricted warfare that I brought to the Pentagon and said, guess what? I showed it to a CIA director and said, this is what they're doing. He said, oh, I need a copy of that book. So I gave him my copy and said, this is what the Chinese Communist Party's intended. Well, they've recently, this is in Epoch Times, March 31st of this year, where it was confirmed. Here's a quote. The professor's multi-pronged strategy involves a range of malign actions to subvert the United States while strengthening the Chinese regime. They include interfering in U.S. elections, controlling the American market, cultivating global enemies to challenge the United States, stealing U.S. technology, expanding Chinese territory, and influencing international organizations. This is an advisor to the Chinese Communist Party. He spoke it in China. We got copies of it. This has been their plan, and they've carried it out to a T. The strategy to topple the United States has two broad components: weakening America through both internal and foreign sources, and strengthening the Chinese regime's economic, military, and diplomatic power. That's what they've been doing. It's very obvious for anybody who has eyes to see, they can see it. That's the Chinese plan. How have they carried it out? Well, they've infiltrated education. Have you heard of the Confucius Institutes? They're established at all the universities. And the university signs an agreement that says we will never say anything disparaging about China. And so all the professors are silenced. So the students say, oh, that's a superior system. You go to colleges and students will say, you know, their economy is growing faster than ours. Not that they didn't steal the intellectual property to make that happen. Not that they don't cheat every possible place. But they're growing faster. It's a better system. It's a controlled system. It's top down. Don't we love China? Because look how they handled the pandemic. They locked things down and this is their subversion. It's in the education system. They've taken over media and entertainment. They've bought studios. They've bought the movie theaters. And you know what? They pulled out recently, which is shocking all these directors in Hollywood. They could control. Here's a perfect example. You know, they won't make a movie. Hollywood will not make a movie in Georgia because they had this election law that passed, and they're so racist for passing the election law. And yet Mulan was made in the province of China where they repress and human organ harvest from the Uyghur population, and they thank them at the end of the movie for being so cooperative, and thanks to the Chinese Communist Party. They bought Hollywood. If Hollywood cared about human rights, they would never make a movie in China. But they've rejected Georgia in the United States. It's because of money. It's economic warfare. And they've looked for political control, financial control, and global institutions. I was invited in by the former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. It's a guy you may have heard of, is Lieutenant General Mike Flynn. And General Flynn and I are friends. He invited me to come in as a money manager from Texas to come in and brief his team on the threat of China. And the head of the China house at DIA is a guy named Lonnie Henley, and at the time he was mentored by a guy named Montepuerto, who was convicted of spying for China. Convicted, sentenced, went to prison for it. And Lonnie went to defend him in open court. And then he got reprimanded by the DIA. But he still ran the China department at the Defense Intelligence Agency. And General Flynn, why are you bringing in a money manager from Texas to educate the Defense Intelligence Agency on China? He says, I can't find anybody in Washington who will speak the truth. So I go in, and Lonnie brings in the counter to this, which is a former head of the World Bank and the head of the Carnegie Institute for International Peace, and they are saying how good China is and how China is our friend. And we just need to bow to China because inevitably they are going to be the strongest power in the world. We need to cooperate with them. And I have a debate for telling some of these things about unrestricted warfare for an hour. And General Flynn thanked me. I've got a nice picture of him with me in my office, and we've stayed in touch and stayed friends. But that's how bad it is. They've taken over global institutions. You wonder why the World Health Organization didn't tell you the truth about where this virus started? It's because they own the World Health Organization. Okay, so this is a part. There's a guy named Italian communist Antonio Gramsci who wrote about the long march through the institutions. It describes how a society could be subverted without recourse to arms by co-opting schools, universities, courts, corporations, media, and political parties. Dedicated leftists could effect revolutionary change. This has been a plan in the works for 100 years, and they're carrying it out with systemic drive and purpose. How do you do it? You exploit intersectionality. You dismantle cultural hegemony. You subvert the ideological opposition. You challenge the family, the religion, and the political order. You follow the rules for radicals by Saul Alinsky, but also Machiavelli's The Prince. And at the core of all of this is you bribe people with economic warfare. You make it in their economic interests. So when you see a large company saying, I'll give you an extra $100 in your paycheck if you'll take a shot, or I will fine you $100 a paycheck if you don't. It's all economic warfare. You're going to lose your job if you don't do as we say. And if we go down that path, America is gone. We cannot allow that path. It's not by accident that the church is turning from a biblical worldview. It's not by accident that the military is embracing social change over readiness. It's not by accident that Wall Street's embracing stakeholder capitalism and ESG over profits and shareholders. I met Milton Friedman a couple of times, a brilliant man. Milton Friedman would say the purpose of a corporation is to serve its shareholders. You have to follow all the rules, and you have to take care of your employees or they'll quit, and you have to serve your customers or you won't have any. But in the end, the decisions of a corporation are to be made for the benefit of the shareholders. They don't say that anymore. They say it's stakeholder capitalism. Stakeholder has to consider every stakeholder. That's the person that lives in the town where the corporation is run. That's the customers. That's the employees. That's the potential future employees. That's the government. That's, you know what? The corporation has to serve everybody because it belongs to everybody. That, by definition, is communism. That's exactly what it is. And they're pushing this stakeholder capitalism on America even today. And the heads of corporation are doing it. Read a great book by Vivek Ramaswamy, who is a brilliant man. And he spoke at a conference I was just at, and it's called Woke Inc. You wonder why Coca-Cola would bother to offend at least half of their consumers by opposing election reform laws? Why would they do that? Because they're getting paid to do that. We know the strategy. Let's look at the tactics. Education, the long march to the institution has taken over the ivory tower. Even when I went to college, the University of Tulsa, I had a Marxist college professor in economics. He was an absolute Marxist. Now, he knew my dad was a stockbroker, and he asked me for stock tips. I thought, what's a communist want stock tips? Well, we have the current show of Economic War Room. We interview a man named James Simpson. He wrote the book, Who Was Karl Marx? And the fact is, Karl Marx was a stock trader. He would have been a day trader today. He loved the stock market. He lost most of the time, and he begged his relatives for money, and he waited for relatives to die so he could get the money. But he was just a reprobate, but he loved investing in the stock market. He's just terrible at it. Communists all want to make money because it's all about the money. The question is how many people can we dupe into putting us in power so that we can take everybody's money? You know who the wealthiest woman from Venezuela is? Hugo Chavez's daughter. She inherited billions from her father, who was poor growing up and promised to spread the wealth if they put him in charge of Venezuela. Look how that worked. Vladimir Putin's one of the wealthiest men on the planet, started as a communist. All of the great, Castro was one of the wealthiest men on the planet. Communism. It's all about me taking from everybody for me, but don't tell anybody what I'm doing. So they've taken over the ivory tower, and they want to eliminate the ACT and SAT. They have legalized discrimination by race, and we have the Confucius Institutes. Now, this isn't new. The Nazis took over higher education in the 1930s, and there were a lot of pro-Hitler people running the colleges in the 1930s. Here's another tactic, finance. $40 trillion is dedicated to the ESG movement. That stands for environment, social, and governance. No, what it really stands for is eliminate fossil fuels to push a green standard and climate change issues. S is social justice critical race, to make sure that every corporate board has at least one minority. And by the way, it'd be kind of nice if it was LGBTQ. That's what we really like. And that's what they're pushing. And the G, so that's the social justice critical race. And the G's governance is, again, it's a gender agenda. It's LGBTQ agenda. It's not about really protecting the environment. You know, they're pushing all of these electric cars. Everybody's got to get an electric car, and I love electric cars. I think Teslas are great. I think it's a great innovation. But, you know, California's got some problems with their power grid, and if everybody drove an electric car, the grid would fail. China has problems with their power grid. And are you going to tell the Africans, when they could get a good gasoline-powered thing that would drive across where there's no roads and no power plants, I'm sorry, you have to drive an electric car. If everybody drove an electric car right now, the grid would fail. It really is about making money. That's what it's bottom line about. So that is the dictatorship of woke capital. Do you know we've invested $3 trillion in China through our stock market? All right, corporate America, Mill Road Capital wants progressive governments fund to improve governance and diversity in small public companies. In other words, we want to push this progressive agenda not just to the big companies, but to the small companies. And how are we going to do it? We're going to offer them investment dollars. This is a George Soros style approach. to taking over America. We know the strategy. Here's tactics in corporate America. Chevron had a shareholder vote, and their shareholders, which include a lot of index funds, and I've got a show coming up on this, Economic War Room. By the way, I've got these cards up here. You can get that show free. You ought to watch it every week. In 30 minutes a week, you'll get more education and better education than watching Fox News 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I don't say that bragging. I'm saying that that's truthful because we get right to the point. We tell the truth, and it doesn't take a lot of time. And with every show, we produce an economic battle plan. It's a PDF document you can get for free. All of this is available free, and you can read everything we said, so you don't have to take notes. It's all in there in the battle plan, and then it has action steps. What do I do about it? How do I fight this? But anyway, shareholder, they had a vote, and they voted basically to adopt the Paris Climate Accords, which would push Chevron out of business. ExxonMobil had a vote, and 3 directors of ExxonMobil were recently elected who have publicly stated we should no longer allow fossil fuels to be used in the world. They're directors of ExxonMobil. This is a serious problem because woke investors are taking over and they're using your money. If you have money in an index fund or a mutual fund, those mutual funds and index funds are voting for all of this nonsense because they want to be part of the communists that are in charge when they take over. Facebook is banned in China, but they promote Chinese interests. Why is that? They want to force vaccine mandates even though they're going to lose employees. Why? Because they've sold out to a woke agenda. All right, we know in media and social media, cancel culture. You know, when I started Economic War Room on Facebook, we had, I don't know, a couple of thousand subscribers on Facebook, followers on Facebook, and we regularly had 100,000 views for our videos. Right now, we have 30-some thousand followers on Facebook, and we're lucky if we get 1,000 or 2,000 because they're throttling us. Now, we had a breakthrough. We've got one up with Michelle Bachmann, who I interviewed recently, and Michelle's we actually saw that 27,000 people saw that, and that's the most we've had in forever. Facebook is trying to shut down any alternative voices. That's why pick up this card and you can get all of this. Chinese, fact-checking. Who fact-checks the fact-checkers? They absolutely lie. I caught them in several lies, flat out, complete lies, fabrications, and they never admit when they were lying. We did Every Legal Vote coalition, and they said that our site was filled with malware, according to McAfee. So we hired the engineers at McAfee to come clean our site, and they said, we can't clean your site. There's no malware there. We'll certify you as a McAfee clean site. But the fact checkers never relented. New York Times published that our whole website that was everylegalvote.com was loaded with malware. That's a lie. The Chinese have bought out Hollywood. We've talked about that. Hillary Clinton was at a conference, and the Islamists came up to her and said, you've got to stop these people that are saying bad things about the Prophet Muhammad. And she said, well, we have a pesky little thing in America called free speech. So we can't really stop them, but what we can do is shame them. And we will shame you if you say that Prophet Muhammad did something this or that or whatever. That's been pretty effective, hasn't it? All right, deep state, weaponized intelligence, and government bureaucracy. They promote safety. They've used outright espionage. The Chinese have admitted that they've manipulated our elections. I didn't say that. I read that to you from the Epoch Times, where the Chinese said we're going to manipulate elections. Because if I said that somebody interfered in our election, and I said that the vote was rigged, if I did that, then Facebook would just shut me down. So I didn't say that. I said the Chinese said that. It's in their doctrine. Manipulate elections and the corporate threats, the NBA and the Major League Baseball. Hey, you don't change your rules, we're going to move Major League Baseball's the game out of Atlanta and move it. They're threatening all of us. You do what we say or we will punish you. It's all economic warfare. In the economy, we're talking now, Elizabeth Warren's talking about taxing wealth rather than income, which of course the Constitution does not allow, but they're going to look at what's in your stock portfolio. Well, it's up a certain amount. We're going to take, not when you sell the stock, we're just going to take a piece of it because it's up. And again, do you know what a chaos that would bring to our stock markets? It would ruin the ability to raise capital. It would ruin investments. The regulation, we're just going to keep increasing the minimum wage. You know what? That doesn't help anybody because inflation turns around and goes up as a result, and the people you're supposedly helping are hurt by it. It is insane. We're going to crush small business and entrepreneurs, control the supply chains. The Chinese are stealing our intellectual property, and then they're bribing foreign nations with their Belt and Road Initiative. You know all of this, but it's not on happenstance. It's coordinated. It's planned. Promote racial divisions. You know there's Chinese money funding Black Lives Matter, but there was also American corporate money funding Black Lives Matter. And the goal of the Chinese, they said the goal is street riots and a political crisis in the United States. And when I brought that up in the Pentagon, they said, no, America's too stable. We'll never have riots. That's not going to happen. No political crisis. This was 2009. And they said, not going to happen in America. Well, I'm sorry. The Chinese were right. The Pentagon was wrong. If necessary, they'll hack our infrastructure. They'll use an electromagnetic pulse. All of these things are a part of this long march through the institutions. It's a communist plan. It was written about in The Naked Communist and published in the Congressional Record in 1963. This is a guy, Manning Johnson. I'm going to play a very short clip from this if it plays. But this guy wrote the book, Color, Communism, and Common Sense. He became a communist because he thought it was the best thing to help black Americans, and then he realized that they were just being used. And this is from the 50s.
A book that I think ought to be in every home library. It's entitled Color, Communism, and Common Sense by Manning Johnson. Manning Johnson was a Negro, and he was also a member of the Communist Party. He joined the party as a young man because he honestly believed that the communists were trying to improve the conditions of his people. He was a dedicated communist. But after many years, Manning Johnson finally came to the realization that the communists weren't the least bit interested in improving the conditions of the Negro people. He discovered that instead they were merely planning to use his people, and these are his words, to use them as cannon fodder in a bloody revolution to destroy America. As early as 1928, the communists declared that the racial differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric. By constantly probing and straining at this one spot, they calculated that eventually the cloth could be torn apart and that Americans could be divided, weakened, and perhaps even set against each other in open combat. We must not be led into placing the blame for the riots, the civil disorders, on the Negro people of our nation. Even those few who are promoting hatred and violence in the black communities are not themselves the cause. They're merely being used by forces far bigger than they are to promote the violent phase of the revolution in America.
Does that sound like what we're seeing? And it's not just from 1928 or the 1950s. Here in Tulsa, my father introduced me to a former communist named Eldridge Cleaver, who came to the same conclusions. And the founders of BLM are Marxist Satanists. It's a fact. And there are a lot of good people that have been swept up in this. This is a purpose of dividing us and separating us. Now, America has race problems. There's racism has been in America, but it's true in India, it's true in Japan, it's true in Latin America, it's true around the world. And those are things spiritually we need to deal with. But that does not allow you to tear down the founding of this nation and destroy this nation. We just need to get closer to Jesus and the race problems will go away. That's the solution. All right, so here, investments. They want to limit your choice. They want to control retirement plans. We fought during the Trump administration to make sure that if you had a retirement plan, it had to be invested for the good of the investor and not for the good of society. And they put that in the Department of Labor under Secretary Scalia. Second Biden got in, he ripped it out. The purpose of investing is not for the shareholder, it's not for the investor. The purpose of investing is for the good of society. That's one step away from taking your retirement plan and saying it has to all be invested in treasury bonds to benefit society. And that's in the works. That's part of the plan. Larry Fink. Have you heard that name before? Larry Fink runs BlackRock. BlackRock has $10 trillion. He says it's more important to combat climate change than get returns for shareholders. $10 trillion. The government gave him huge contracts in the bailout. It's a leftist agenda. Here, you may not be able to see this. This says what people want. Importance of value versus client stated importance. So we asked, there's a poll Money Management Institute did and said, what is important to you? Is it arts and culture, corporate governance, diversity, religion, sustainable corporate practices, climate solutions, environmental protection, human rights, or social justice, or you can see in the box, my country and family. What people really want is they want investments that are going to strengthen their country and strengthen their family. They don't want all the rest of that nonsense. But not once in ESG do you hear anything about promoting the family or supporting the family or being patriotic or supporting this nation. We know the strategy in the name of liberty, professing to be wise, they became fools. They say up is down, right is wrong, men are women, women are men. It's like the French Revolution when they tried to enforce a week that had 10 days in it. It failed miserably because the natural order of things is what it says in Genesis. 6 days of work and a day of rest. That's a week. We deny human nature and we deny objective truth. An X and a Y chromosome means that you're male. XX, female. But that's denied. And by the way, for saying that, I'm sure that there's someone who wants to cancel this and sees that. Other new threats in the largest property company in China, Evergrande, is failing. It is their Lehman Brothers moment potentially. The vaccine mandates, we've supplied our enemies with maybe $80 billion worth of weapons through Afghanistan. There's a talk to abandon the Space Force, and I've got a show coming out on that, how dangerous that would be, because we would lose GPS, we would lose our satellites, we would lose our ability to communicate. Plus, if they militarize space, they could take a single tungsten rod and push it down. It would come through the atmosphere, and it would explode like an atomic bomb. And we cannot deed space to our enemies. We've opened the borders, which is a Cloward-Piven strategy to overwhelm our system. Why is it that 20,000 people can assemble under a bridge in Texas and we don't test them for virus? We don't require them to take a vaccine. We just release them all across the country. Why? Why? If they're interested in our health, why are they demanding that employers require vaccination, but we release 20,000 people? And that's just a tiny drop in the bucket from immigration. And destroy the money supply. Here's a chart that's going to scare you. This is the M1 money supply. That's up to the year 2020. You can see it's just bouncing along. This is $2 trillion. This is $4 trillion. That's how much money we had in supply in M1 money supply a year ago. It is now approaching $20 trillion. They're printing money like crazy and shoving it out the door. This will destroy our currency if we don't correct it. A new threat's emerging, programmable money. They're going to give you digital money. They call it a digital dollar. You'll get it in your wallet. It'll be your tax refund, and they'll say it's wonderful, and it'll be convenient, and you'll take it because otherwise you won't have the money. It's free. But once they get that digital dollar created, they can tell you where you can spend it. They can turn it on. So it's only good in the city of Tulsa for you Tulsans. You can't spend it anywhere else, so they can limit your travel. Or they can say it's only good for the next 30 days, so they force you to go out and spend it. Or they can say it's only good after 30 days. Or they can say if you went into McDonald's and try and spend your digital dollar, they can say, no, we looked at your cholesterol records. You cannot eat a Big Mac. That's what they're doing in China with the social credit score, and that's what they're pushing here. I've got a show on that you can watch. It explains it all. If Biden's willing to look into your bank account, if you have $600 or more in it, which they've said recently, absolutely is willing to control all the money. How do we fight back? I got 7 minutes to tell you we do the bad, the good, and the beautiful. The bad is the problem. The good is what you can do about it, and the beautiful is we try and take people to know the truth of the Lord Jesus Christ. We do that on every show we can. So we're still the majority. It's still our money. That's the point number one. It doesn't belong to Wall Street. It doesn't belong to the government. China is desperate for American investments. If we cut them off, China will implode. And we have the same. I have the same vote as my 18-year-old daughter. My vote's identical. Fortunately, she's brilliant and she votes conservatively, and she's very smart. But if she didn't, her vote can cancel mine out. But there's a difference. She doesn't have the money that I have. She can't pay for college on her own. And so I need to weaponize that which I have to be effective in fighting this war. Jesus said, if you aren't faithful with unrighteous mammon, no one will ever trust you with true riches. This is a commandment for you to be faithful with your money. We did a poll. If you're 55 and older, 80% said patriotism is very important, compared with 42% of those age 18 to 38. 2/3 of the older group cite religion as very important, compared with fewer than 1/3 of the younger group. It means we have some education. My country, my family, my God, all of that. We have to educate young people to know that that's what's truly important. And we need to use our money to do it. Most important, I put it as number 2, but it really should be number 1. How do we deal with this? We need to repent. Out of all the scriptures that there are, there's only one that says how God will heal a nation. And that's this one. Well, actually, 2 Chronicles 7:14. This one is Jeremiah 18:5-8. It says, O house of Israel, can I not do with you as this potter? Look, as the clay is in the potter's hand, so you are in my hand, house of Israel. The instant I speak concerning a nation, concerning a kingdom, to pluck up, to pull down, to destroy it, if that nation against whom I have spoken turns from its evil, I will relent of the disaster that I thought to bring upon it. And 2 Chronicles 7 tells us, if my people, called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways and seek my face, then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sins, and heal their land. That's the answer. We cry out to God. We did it this morning here. City elders across the country can help solve this problem and bring this nation back. And Jeremiah is a promise right there. I will relent of the disaster. I think we're under disaster right now, and we need God to relent of that disaster and turn his favor back on us. Okay, how do we do it? We need to promote moral, democratic capitalism. Moral. Adam Smith, the founder of capitalism, wrote in The Wealth of Nations in 1776, also wrote the book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments. You got to follow the golden rule. You can't be greedy and crony. You got to be giving and loving and understanding. It's God's money. You're entrusted with it, and God doesn't want it involved in shady, despicable things. So crony capitalism, end. We have to be moral. We have to be democratic. Every person should have an equal opportunity in America, regardless of their background, regardless of their race or anything else. We have not done that. We need to do that. We need to make this equal opportunity, not equal outcome. This is equality, not equity. And the third thing is capitalism. Free enterprise works. It works everywhere it's tried. Communism fails everywhere it's tried. And they think, well, I'll do it right. No, you won't. It's a failed system. If the Pilgrims couldn't do it right, if they couldn't do it right in the Mayflower Compact, I'm telling you, you can't. If the early church couldn't do it right and they tried it, it does not work. God designed us, and he put natural order in things, and incentives work. So not cronyism, but capitalism. And we've got to prepare for a monetary shift. If we're going to have a digital dollar, we have to demand that the Federal Reserve give a Bill of Rights. They will not violate our privacy. They will not take money. They will follow the Constitution. They will not take money. Because you know what? The Federal Reserve is not a constitutional organization. It's a private bank. Congress has deeded them power and authority. We have a solution for that, by the way. The federalism solution is, in Texas, we have a bullion depository. You can put money on deposit there, and they will hold gold in your name. And then if you want to use it, I'm suggesting they adopt a digital version of that so that you have a Texan card or an Oklahoman card or a New Mexican card, and you can go and you can use it at any coffee shop you want. And a gold is $1,800 an ounce. So 1/1000th of an ounce would buy a cup of coffee. Unless you go to Starbucks, and then 3/1000ths of an ounce would buy a cup of coffee. But you use it wherever you want, and they do it, and they keep it all in gold, and they guarantee your privacy. This is under the Constitution. Article 1, Section 10 says, no state shall issue currency except gold and silver coins. I think constitutional money is better than fiat money, and it's certainly better than Federal Reserve money. So we're pushing that in Texas. We wish Oklahoma would stay with us, and we have to demand the IRS stay out of it. If you buy gold at one price, put it in your account, and you use that as your medium exchange issued by a state, you should not have to pay a capital gain if it goes up in value. This is revolutionary. You got to watch our show on this. This will change the world if this, and it's under the Constitution. And you need to weaponize your money. You're spending, you're giving, and you're investing. We need to support entertainment like The Chosen and get good shows out there telling the truth. We need to take back entertainment and education and finance. And we need to promote, instead of ESG, LSV, liberty, security, and values. And if you look us up, you'll see show after show on that, and we're training financial advisors. We provide economic war room. You can watch it multiple ways, economic battle plans, and the NSIC Institute they mentioned. We're training 10,000 financial advisors at Liberty University who are going to be available to help you weaponize your money. So learn more about it at nsic.org. If you already have a financial advisor, then you need to have them come to our training. If you don't have a financial advisor, then you need to tell us so we can introduce you to somebody who's come to our training. This is going to change the world, $1 trillion, but we need your help. So here, it's a poll. Do you agree or disagree? My preference is a financial advisor broker, most like myself, related to values, interests, and politics. 74% agree. Don't you want a broker or a financial planner or an insurance agent that agrees with you about saving America? Well, if you don't have that, you need that. And if your advisor is a good person, send them to us. We'll train them. We'll educate them. Would you rather invest financially in efforts to promote the ideals and concepts of socialism or encourage growth through capitalism and free markets? 22% want socialism, 56% want capitalism, and 21% don't even know. Okay, so we need a political great awakening. This is our Dunkirk moment. All seems lost, but there were 300,000 men trapped on the beaches of Dunkirk, and the government couldn't get them off. So they had to call on the people. And the people got small ships. You are the small ships. Your money, your little bank account can be weaponized to help save America. And Jesus told you you must do it. I don't want any of it. I don't want to take a dime from that. This is all free. You can get it all free. But your financial advisor needs to be helping you weaponize your money to save America. So start with Economic War Room, get educated, get the free subscription, nominate your financial advisor. That's on the back of this. The front is Economic War Room, the back is the NSIC. Weaponize your money, and let's become a Dunkirk movement of small ships. Now, on the program, and I'm just hit 0, but I'm going to tell you real fast, we've covered some amazing topics on the program. Election fraud, COVID warning. We told about COVID before anybody knew it existed. Winning the war on poverty, should you own gold, defunding the Chinese, protecting free speech, all of that. And we've had some recognizable people. Alan West, Rosemary Gibson, Everett Piper, Fred Flight, Dr. Ben Carson's become a great friend, General Stephen Quast, Glenn Beck, Phil Robertson, Louis Gohmert. You can see the list of power people that have come in and come alongside us, because this is the way to weaponize your money, obey Christ, and save America. First, give him your heart. Second, be faithful with your unrighteous mammon. And I'm going to end with this. It's a short clip from really a great president, the first president I got to vote for.
Our founding fathers here in this country brought about the only true revolution that has ever taken place in man's history. Every other revolution simply exchanged one set of rulers for another set of rulers. But only here did that little band of men so advance beyond their time that the world has never seen their like since, evolve the idea that you and I have within ourselves the God-given right and the ability to determine our own destiny. But freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
This is an economic war. You're soldiers. You have money. You must obey Christ, weaponize your money, and we can pass the great liberty of America on to future generations. God bless you and thank you.